Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Small Business Impact Grant and Business Resources webinar. I'm Andrew Wittenberg with Salt Lake City's Department of Economic Development, serving as the Marketing and Research Manager. Joined today with our friends from Salt Lake County to have a discussion about a great program for businesses that may be beneficial for you or somebody you might know. We're joined by Rudy Mathis, who is the Economic Development Manager for the Salt Lake County Office of Regional Development. Thanks, Rudy, for being here. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for having me.
We're also joined by our newly minted Director of Economic Development in Salt Lake City, Ben Collender, is here with us. Ben, congratulations on the recent appointment and good to see you as well.
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be here talking about this amazing resource for businesses.
Thanks. And we're also joined by Roberta Reicheld, our local business and entrepreneurship manager, who is fantastic. Many of our businesses joining on our webinar today will recognize Roberta and her colleague, our colleague, Will Wright, who are out meeting with businesses every day during normal times and getting to know our small businesses extremely well and connecting them with resources. Roberta, good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here too.
Okay, great. We'll jump right in now that introductions are out of the way. And Rudy, I'll start with you just to talk a bit about the Small Business Impact Grant. I know there was a large sum of money initially dedicated to this program, and much of it is still there. Maybe give us a little bit of a background on the program and how it was developed.
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and start sharing my presentation so that everybody can see what we've got going. But as you mentioned, this grant started with, oh, there we go. We started with $40,000 or $40 million rather. 40,000 wouldn't have gone very far. But $40 million that we had dedicated to helping small businesses. We knew that there was a huge need, and anybody in the business community knows that there still is a huge need. And we had kind of learned a little bit from the frustrations that people had over the PPP and the EIDL programs, and we wanted to try to help out once we got our portion of CARES Act funding from the federal government. And so initially we targeted some niche, a little bit more niche businesses, businesses that were impacted directly by county health orders. And so that those health orders required certain businesses to close, others to significantly alter their operations. And we wanted to kind of really target them. And at the same time, because it's CARES Act funded, there was some concerns over federal double dipping and using funds for the same purposes, and we didn't want to be on the hook for that. So we limited applicants to people who had not received any CARES Act funding. Since July 28th, we opened it up more broadly. And we now accept applications from all types of businesses. There's no business type restriction on that. And businesses who have received less than $35,000 in CARES Act funding are now eligible. And to keep in mind, there's a lot of CARES Act funded programs. So PPP, EIDL, the state's ComRent program, the Shop in Utah. So there's a number of these that cumulatively can't exceed $35,000. The whole time we've provided language services to businesses. We provide Spanish, Vietnamese, Mandarin, kind of regularly, and then we also have Arabic speakers on call if needed. And then we have a business relief hotline that is open 12 hours a day, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and staffed by some wonderful people there who hopefully can answer all of your questions. And so, as I mentioned, we made some changes. And so for the eligibility, the red are kind of changes that were made from the beginning, but obviously a business has to be located in Salt Lake County. That's the count. That's the population we're trying to serve. We made a cutoff for fewer than 100 employees, and most of the businesses that apply have way fewer than that. So sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed individuals, all the way up to businesses that have 100 employees. And then again, you have to have received less than 35,000 in CARES Act funds from, cumulatively from all sources. And you have to have been in operation since January 1st or prior to January 1st of this year. And you also have to be able to show a loss. We're not in the business of giving grants to businesses that have seen profit, they have huge profit margins during COVID. We want to help those that have seen the losses. And being in any business industry is how we're moving forward with that. And some of the questions that we get on this program are, how can it be used? So it can be used on any operating cost. We don't, because it's a federal grant, it can't be used to pay taxes. But pretty much all other operating expenses can qualify. So rent or mortgage, utilities, payroll, inventory, insurance, and this can be retroactive. So if you had to make payments in June that you are now kind of on the hook for, you can pay for those things with the grant. And then we also can help pay for COVID related costs such as modifications that promote social distancing, such as plexiglass or signage, or shifting things around in your space, as well as protective gear and sanitation. So that's kind of an overview of what you can get. The grant amount, we offer grants up to $35,000, but it's the lesser of your verified loss or $35,000. So just because you apply doesn't guarantee a $35,000 check in the mail, but you can get up to that. And I mentioned earlier the Business Relief Hotline that we have. And so the phone number is here, 385-468-4011. And as I mentioned, Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Arabic are the languages that we support. If there are other languages, we can help provide support for those language speakers as well. But those are kind of who we have on staff.
Hey, Rudy, if I may ask a quick question there. I know that you've mentioned, and I've been on quite a few calls where you've talked about the volume of calls that have gone into this line. What's the protocol if you called? Is there a voicemail, or will someone return a call, or what happens there?
There is a voicemail. That's a really good question. Since this second round of the grant opened, the call line has been quite inundated. We are working our best to work through those calls. We're hiring more people on to provide more support. But what I would ask is, one, leave a message if you don't get through to anybody, and then two, call back. Because there's a good chance that you'll get through to somebody before they have a chance to call you back if you call, once a day or so in order to get in touch with somebody, maybe even a couple times a day. The call volume has been huge, and which is what we want to see. But unfortunately, with the semester starting up at the university, and we were using university students, some of our scheduling has shifted, so that's been a challenge that we're working through, but we're building back up capacity so that we can answer questions. And then I also want to point out on this slide the link, so slco.org/COVID-19. And then there's the banner up above, and if you click on that, that'll get you to the application portal. So recommend anybody on this call go to that and get started as soon as you can. So I want to run through now just a preview of what the application will look like. We use a program called Zoom Grants, and there are some quirks to it, but I wanted to let everybody know kind of what they would be seeing when they get to the application. So here's a kind of a little overview of the process. So on the website, and it's listed there again, you complete an eligibility pre-screening. We just want to make sure that anybody who's going to effort of filling out a complete application is actually eligible. So it's a short, I think there's 8 or 9 questions, maybe not even that many. And, so one of those is your email address. So you complete the pre-screening, and then once you've completed that, you will receive an email. So the one thing I will say is double and triple check that the email that you enter into that pre-screening is accurate. Because if it's not, you will never end up getting the email saying that you're eligible or that you're ineligible. So once you've received that email, you click on the link provided and you create an account in Zoom Grants. And then once you've created that account, you can start your application, and anytime you need, you can go to zoomgrants.com/login to log in or make any changes that you need. And so it's a pretty straightforward process, but it's one of those that has some steps that you need to take into consideration. And if you do have any problems at all, you can always reach out to the hotline, and we'll try to help navigate that with you. So the first, as I mentioned, the eligibility check. Again, some simple contact information, some eligibility questions that just kind of go through whether you're located in the county, how many employees you've got, whether you were licensed prior to January 1st, the industry of your business, which no longer is an eligibility question. It's more kind of an internal research question. We're just interested who's applying at this point. And then whether or not you've applied to other federal programs, CARES Act funded programs, rather. And answering all those will get you a determination to your email inbox. And then, so you've created an account, you're eligible, you've created an account in Zoom Grants, and you log in to start out. You'll first see on this application summary tab that's highlighted in orange, you get just some general information. It'll talk through kind of, you have to have at least $500 in losses. That's the minimum grant amount that we provide. And it'll go through kind of just a good overview of the grant and the process. And then there's some contact information that we want to collect. So you've got your organization legal name, and then whoever the point of contact is, as well as the business address and contact information there. Again, this is another way to verify that you are actually located in Salt Lake County. And then if you have somebody who is in charge of the financing or in charge of all of the budget, we'd ask that you provide that contact information as well. I know that many businesses, it's one person running everything, and so it'll be the same name twice, but we just ask if you do have somebody that we have questions about financing or budget, that we can reach out to that individual. The one thing that I will point out is when you put in like federal tax ID, your EIN, it needs to match the documentation that we'll be asking for at the end of the application. So just make sure that you're inputting everything correctly. Again, that contact information is input correctly, and everything like that. And then after the application summary, there's this application questions tab. And as you go through that, again, it's fairly straightforward. We do ask whether you've received funding from our first round. It doesn't disqualify you if you have, but we take that into consideration in your total eligible grant amount, because between rounds 1 and round 2, we only allow for a maximum of $35,000 in the award. And so we just take that into consideration. And so if you answer that you did receive some, you'll see a box, question number 2 appears, and you can input how much you received, and that'll come into play as we determine a grant amount. And then we have questions about CARES Act funding. We list some of them. There are probably more that exist. I I know the shop in Utah one, for instance, is not listed, but that would be considered CARES Act funded. So any of those, you'd want to make sure that you had selected accurately. Again, if you have received CARES Act funding lower than $35,000, you are eligible to apply. If you are still awaiting a determination, unfortunately, you'll have to kind of hold off on applying until you've received a determination from any of those other programs. And then we ask, how much you've received cumulatively in those as well. An employee question, a valid business license number and jurisdiction. So that's critical that you include both the license number and the jurisdiction. And if you do have questions about licensing, I know that different cities have different requirements, and fortunately we have Salt Lake City folks on call today, but some businesses in some jurisdictions aren't required to have a license, and we're willing to work with people on that. But if you are required to have a license, please put in your license number and your city, and then there's documentation that you'll have to provide as well. If we ask for your EIN, and then if you have a health department permit number, we ask for that as well. All of these things can be used to just verify that you are operating legally in the county. And then this is one of the more critical steps of the application. So we ask for your expected sales, and that's based off of the same period of time last year. So 2019, between kind of March 16th to July 31st. That would be kind of any revenues that you had during that time would be included in your expected sales. Then your actual would be that period for this year. And then any COVID-related expenses, again, those are, modifications that you've made to your facility, changes that or things you've had to buy to protect employees and or customers, things like that. Essentially anything that you would not have had to purchase but for the COVID-19 pandemic. And then those three categories, A, B, and C, are what would become your potential total SBIG amount prior to any CARES Act funding. So if you have received any previous CARES Act funding, please enter that in column D, and then that will be subtracted from the total from A, B, and C to get you a potential total SBIG amount. And again, the maximum is 35,000. So even if your total in E exceeds that, the maximum you can get is 35,000. And then this is on the same page. It's the planned grant spending. This is also critical. So down at the bottom, there is a total amount, and that total amount should match column E from the previous slide, so the top section of the grant amount, because we want you to account for all of the funding. Sometimes businesses have been eligible for $20,000, but they've only articulated $5,000 and how they were going to use it, and we just want to make sure that you can use all the money that you're going to get. That helps us cover our bases as well on the county side. Not that we'd get thrown in jail or anything if that didn't happen, but we just want to make sure that we've got our bases covered. So just kind of articulate how you're going to spend it. Again, pretty much any operating cost is allowable. Being detailed here is helpful. And the one thing I'll mention is I didn't show for the sake of time, but there's another table like this one that if you did receive previous CARES Act funding, we also ask that you outline how you spent that. And that way we can make sure that the funds aren't being used for the exact same purpose. Okay.
I assume, Rudy, this is good for an estimate. I'm assuming there's probably some change that could not be foreseen for some of these rows here.
Yes, yeah, this is an estimate. This is kind of how you anticipate. I mean, chances are rent, you could get a pretty good idea. But there's other things that come in, like, you don't necessarily know your monthly utilities, but you can kind of do an average. So all of this would be kind of best guesses. And there's certainly opportunity for, changing things around a little bit. There's a reporting requirement at the end of the grant that will help you account for actual spending once it's already done. But again, this is just a kind of a budget on how you think it'll look like. Oh, let's see. There we go. So step 4, we ask, uploading documents. For any financial losses that you're claiming, you'll need to upload documents, bank statements, deposit slips. There's a whole long list. What I'll say from experience is that most people have the easiest time if they can do a combination of a couple of these. So if you have like an accounting software, for instance, and you can download a report from that and then pair that with a bank statement, that's going to be a lot easier for our review team to verify. So just keep that in mind. Try to make it as easy to verify the amount as possible. You upload those, you just click these upload buttons, and Zoom Grants is a little bit wonky, and I'll mention this throughout, is that anytime you click like a refresh on the page or so if you upload, you'll then have to kind of click refresh in order to see what you've actually uploaded. And anytime you step out of a box where you input information, you may just have to hit refresh in order for that information to show. It's just a bug in the software, a little kind of built in. So unfortunately, it causes some headaches sometimes, but it's pretty good if you know about it. So upload the supporting documents. We accept a variety of file types, and just name it. And then you'll certify that all the information is true and accurate. And then you hit, and this is counterintuitive, but there's a gray Submit Now button. That's actually the button that you click, and it will not change color. It's just gray. So I know that a lot of links are grayed out until they're active. This one's they just chose gray. So that's an active link. Just submit when you're ready. If you are missing things, there will be some red text that pops up and says, hey, could you do this? Otherwise, there will be a little spot for you to initial and certify that everything's true and accurate. And then it's submitted. And then you'll receive an email saying that it's been submitted from zoomgrants.com. And then this 7 days is that I have on this slide is probably true for applications that are completely complete, that aren't missing anything, that financials match up with requests. The process goes pretty quick. If you are missing things, you will receive contact from somebody on our helpline to ensure that all of the information is complete and accurate, and they'll work through if things are missing. But the sooner that you can get everything uploaded and completed, the faster that your application will move through the process. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know the Salt Lake City team is willing to answer questions that are outside of my purview. But again, apply now, get your application started as soon as possible. We still do have quite a bit of money remaining, and we'd love to give it to your business. So that's all I've got, and yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
That's great, Rudy. Appreciate the presentation there. It's helpful, I know, for the technical assistance side for those who are considering this. And I know there are a lot of folks who have actually started the application process that have not fully submitted. There is time here, right? But time is sort of the essence in making sure that you get the applications in by when? Is there a rolling deadline or anything that you're aiming toward?
Right now, I believe we're accepting applications through the end of September. Obviously, the sooner the better. And partly that's because, all of this CARES Act funding, and anybody who works in government knows, we have a deadline. It has to be spent by the end of this calendar year. And so we need to make sure that we get money into the hands of businesses as soon as possible so that they can spend it. We do have a reporting deadline. We're asking all businesses who receive funding from us to submit their final reports by the end of November. That way we can ensure that the spending was done, in line with, what's allowable. But yeah, the sooner the better. And if you can't get through on the hotline, if you have questions, just keep trying again and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can.
Great. Thanks, Rudy. Thank you to everyone who is joining here. We've gone through a presentation on the Small Business Impact Grant, and now we're going to move into a question and answer period with our friends here, colleagues in the economic development world. As I mentioned earlier, introducing Rudy Mathis from Salt Lake County, Ben Collender, who is our Director of Economic Development in Salt Lake City, and Roberta Reinkeld, our local business and entrepreneurship manager for the city as well. If you missed it or coming in just now here, almost a little less than halfway through our presentation today. So we do have some questions. I wanted to get started. And the first question is for Rudy. It is regarding the SBIG program. It's asking if a business is eligible if they are a sole proprietor.
Yes, that's one of the things that we wanted to ensure. We wanted to make sure that anybody who's a sole proprietor, self-employed, and independent contractor had access to these funds. And to be honest, I don't have numbers off the top of my head, but I know based off of calls that my team receives, we get a lot of questions and applications from sole proprietors and independent contractors. So don't let that stop you. Just go ahead and apply. And we can work with you on ensuring that all the documentation that you need is there.
Awesome. And a follow-up there on the sole proprietorship piece from Omar on Facebook. Thanks for the question. It's the question is, can the sole proprietors use payroll to pay themselves for lost revenue?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've built in because, as a sole proprietor, your business is your livelihood.
Sure.
And if you're not able to pay yourself, then what's the point of having the business, right? So we do allow that. So in the grant worksheet, you would just account for kind of whatever your typical disbursement is from your business to yourself. You would just kind of plug that into the line there and account for it that way.
Great. We have some awesome questions rolling in now. I want to get back here on track, and I know this particular program, the SBIG, is for those businesses that were in operation prior to January 1st. So Ben, I'll ask you the next question. Are there any programs available for businesses that were opening when COVID hit? We've heard quite a few just in the city that were about to open their doors or going down that process. And in some of these instances, you've had to have been open prior to, let's say, March. Are there any programs available for businesses that were opening during that time?
Yeah, as you can imagine, that'd be a really tough one for a business just about to have a grand opening, and we've been in touch with a few of those. There are two programs I would sort of draw the attention to, obviously, besides this program. One is what was called the Commercial Real Estate Assistance Program. Now it's called ComRent. And that is a state program. That program, the legislature just modified some language to allow for startup and new businesses. So that's online now. Utah.business.gov is a great location for that one. Another program to consider, and there are some nuances to this, but the EIDL program with the SBA, and checking out that information as well is something that can help your business.
Yeah, and Andrew, I'll jump in here as well. So while our current grant guidelines outline that you have to be in business prior to January 1st, this is something that we're also mindful of, and there may be, I don't want to promise anything, but there may be in the future an opening to where that's opened up a little bit. I'm not sure what that would look like if it does happen, but we're considering that.
Great. Well, Chris on Facebook will be interested to hear that if and when that happens. We're hoping for it there, Chris, and we'll certainly keep you posted. as well. Thanks for the question. So our next question then will go back to Rudy. And it's from Sebastian on Facebook. And Sebastian wrote in and said, my rental company received funding from EIDL for a total amount of $10,000. Out of this, $9,000 was a regular loan and $1,000 was a grant. For reporting purposes here, do I only report the $1,000 grant? I assume he's referring to the SBIG application process where you have to account for other funding.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I wish that it was that you only had to account for the $100,000 or the $1,000 grant. But unfortunately, because the EIDL loans were completely CARES Act funded, even the loan portion will have to be accounted for. I know that that's probably not the news that you were wanting to hear, but you'd have to account for the entire $10,000 that you received.
Right. And I know that at some point in there, you're going to talk about, you discussed this earlier about the double dipping and how there's some sensitivities there in going over a certain amount of dollars. John on Facebook writes, will we have a place to create the spending report? Will that be through Zoom Grants Online?
That's actually a really good question, and I do not currently have the answer for that. I don't think anybody at the county does. I think we're still working on how the reporting will be done. And so that is something I'm happy to provide my email address that we can send out, and I can try to follow up with people with these types of questions that I don't have an answer to. But one thing I do know is that once that's determined, any business that has applied and received a grant will be notified exactly how that is to be done. But unfortunately, we don't have an answer for that right now.
Gotcha. That's an interesting part. Roberta, I may depart here for a moment from our questions that are coming in and just ask what you're hearing from small businesses on those needs. And I know we've had some surveys out in recent weeks to see exactly what businesses are really struggling with on the ground. What are you hearing from businesses right now? Where is a big difficulty for them?
It's mostly financial needs. They're worried about the programs that they receive funding from are going to run out before things are back to normal or even close to normal for a lot of businesses. So we're definitely hearing that more funding support would be greatly welcomed. We know that there's still talks going on with the federal government, but we're really not sure on how to proceed if anything should come through that. And also technical assistance, I think, in either signing up, registering for these programs, and also completing the requirements that after you get the money, the spending requirements, as sort of was mentioned in the previous question. There is technical assistance available through our SBDCs, our small business development centers. The one in Salt Lake County is located at the Miller Resource Center in Sandy. The Swazo Business Center is a great resource as far as getting technical assistance, and they have a lot of Spanish speakers there at the Swazo Center. So there's some great resource partners out there that are filling these needs for the businesses.
Great. Thanks, Roberta. And again, if there are businesses in Salt Lake City watching here today on our webinar or watching this even after it's been posted, please reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns specific to your business in the city. This is what we do every day, is help businesses and try to connect them with resources that are available or find solutions for whatever that problem may be. And you can find us on our website at slc.gov/ed. All of the resources we're talking about here today, whether it is the Small Business Impact Grant from the county or the state's programs, the ComRent Assistance Program, and others, you can find them on the subpage, which is our COVID-19 related page, and that's slc.gov/ed/COVID-19. So we encourage you to check it out. Contact us, follow us here on social media, all of our pages, and we're constantly trying to do what we can to help those businesses. Back to questions now, and this isn't a good one, Rudy, for you, from Teresa on Facebook. Thanks, Teresa, for writing in. She says, I had the first grant go around. When does the money need to be spent by?
Okay, so I know that initially there was probably a different language. What has happened with the expansion into round 2 is that we've relaxed the date. So November 30th is is the same date where money needs to be spent, and that's when the reporting will be due. And so whether you got it in round 1 or round 2, the spend date will be the same on that.
Gotcha. So a little bit tighter time frame if you're just jumping in now than if you were in the first round or early in the second. Rudy from Facebook as well, if a business has to close temporarily due to personnel testing positive for COVID-19, is that considered lost revenue?
Yes. So that would be 100% would be included in lost revenue. So, if your business had to close temporarily because of COVID testing or because of a mandate or, whatever it is, as long as it's COVID related, shuttering your business counts as lost revenue. So please include that. And, that would come into effect when you're putting in your actual versus your or your expected versus your actual revenues. So as long as you have documentation that you were closed during that period due to COVID-related issues, that should be fine.
That's a really good point, because you don't think about it necessarily in terms of opening, closing, revenue loss versus are we still continuing on as a business? So that's a good consideration to think about there. Next question. If our organization did receive SBA's PPP funding, but then repaid it in full under the direction of their board, would we therefore then be eligible for this opportunity? If they've gotten PPP, but paid it back to the federal government without spending it out, would they be eligible?
Yes, you would. And one thing I will say is that anybody involved in the SBIG program, we cannot serve as legal counsel or financial counsel for your business, and that's a business's decision that you would have to make. So if you have received PPP money in excess, especially of the $35,000 limit, then that's a business decision that you would have to make, whether to return that money or not before applying. But if you had in answer to that question, yes, returning the money to the federal government would make you eligible for our program, as long as you had returned it prior to applying, and we'd want some documentation that was the case.
Rudy, I've got a follow-up question on that. I assume that applies to EIDL as well.
Yeah. So if you received something, you can either deny the funding if you're still kind of pending, your application is still pending, or you just barely received a determination. You can choose to deny it, and that would make you eligible for our program, or you can return it without having spent it, and that would make you eligible.
So going back to Sebastian's question, the $9,000 that's in a loan, if he pays that off, then he would be eligible to only disclose the $1,000 in grants.
Yeah, that would.
Great.
That's a good point. Yeah. So to Sebastian's question, that would work that way. Again, as long as the money hadn't been spent towards a purpose.
That's great. Good insights there. Ben, I'm curious. You have federal government background, and I know you sort of listen in on these and are well abreast of what's happening. Has there been discussion? Where do we sit on CARES Act funding? And I know there's some back and forth on whether there will be an extension. And do you know anything, or have you heard anything along those lines about the overall sort of bigger pot of CARES Act funding, what that looks like right now?
Yeah, right now at the federal level, at least the last I've heard, is that there's a back and forth between the House and Senate to agree on what that could look like at a federal level. President Trump did make some executive orders as it applies to some of the programs, including unemployment. And that's something Utah was actually one of the first states to get on board with that, if not the first. And so there are programs out there from the federal government being adjusted and being looked into that aren't available today even.
Great. I think you've already answered this, Rudy, but I'll ask it anyway because it's a tight one. What if I got $36,000 in PPP? What if you're just right over that line? Can you still apply?
Unfortunately, no. So even if it was $35,001, that would be the cutoff. And I know that that's not the news that most people want to hear,
Right.
because they're in tough situations, but we had to have a cutoff line somewhere, and we chose the $35,000 line.
A
And
couple of
Rudy,
questions. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead,
to
Ben.
follow up to that, then, so if they gave back a portion of that, to get under the 35, is that possible?
Um, Again, yes, returning all or a portion of the funding, denying it, as long as they're under the $35,000 mark. Again, I can't advise on whether that's the right thing for the business, but if that was a determination that they made, they'd have to provide documentation that they of what they received and what they returned in order to qualify.
And Rudy, is there a, if a business has, let's say, a $34,000 PPP loan, does that disqualify them in any way from the grant in terms of how much is available? Well, if they like the $1,000 difference between the 35 and the 34, right? Or even I assume 34,999, they would have full eligibility for the program.
Yeah, so they would have full eligibility, and if they could show losses in excess large enough, then they would be eligible for the full amount. So, or the maximum award, which is 35,000. So, for instance, if a business could justify, $100,000 in losses and received a $30,000, from CARES Act funding, then they would still be able to receive the maximum award because their losses would be in excess of their previously received CARES Act funding. So to that grant budget table that I showed earlier, that's it'll calculate that for you as you put it in, and that'll provide you with an idea of what you're eligible for.
Great.
Continuing on, more questions rolling in from our online and social media feeds. From Matt on Facebook: how can the grant be used to cover payroll expenses? Will businesses just need to show payroll expenses in excess of the grant amount, is the question, Rudy.
So to cover payroll expenses, we would, ask that in the grant worksheet, you probably have an average payroll cost per month, and you would articulate that that's how you wanted to spend it. If you were exclusively going to spend it on payroll, I don't think it has to be in excess of the grant amount, but what you'd have to show is that what you are eligible for and what you plan to spend match. So if payroll is in excess, then that would be fine. But if if you had, an amount that was under your eligible amount in payroll, then you could put the rest of the money towards some other operating expense. So I hope that answers the question. You would want to show that you have payroll in the amount that you're, trying to justify, but that should come through in the reporting period. And in the application side of things, you would just need to again, as we talked about, you were giving rough estimates because even payroll might shift month to month slightly. So a rough estimate on how much you think or plan on to spend on payroll during, either previous months or future months.
How many businesses have applied?
Oh, how many businesses have applied? I actually had a slide that went over that, and then for the sake of time, took it out. We have had, this is a ballpark. Between the two rounds, I think we've had like 700-ish that have applied. I'm probably way off on that. I wish that I still had that slide and I could consult, but there's still money left. And I just got an answer. 851 businesses have applied. So there you go. I was off by, only 150. Pretty bad guess actually. But yeah.
Rudy, I've got a curveball question for you. Say a business applied for the emergency loan program that the city put out back in March. Could they apply?
Yeah, well, so I am Altuve with stuff underneath my jacket or my shirt, and so I knew that this question was coming and knew how to answer it. And I'm knocking it out of the park. Yes, the city's earlier program and even the state's their whatever Utah Leads Together loan program. Those were not CARES Act funded. So those don't have to be reported as CARES Act money, and any business that has received those are totally eligible to apply.
I love the baseball reference, especially with the bees cap. I just threw you a slow fastball over the center. Apparently, that wasn't a curve.
Yeah, that looked like the Zach Greinke 54-mile-per-hour pitch the other night. That was a softball. That's good to know, though, for those 52 businesses in the city that received that emergency loan program early on in late March, early April, that would essentially allow you to come in on this program, the county's SBIG program, because that $20,000, most businesses received $20,000. That was not funded with CARES Act money. So therefore, you are fully, you can fully subscribe to up to the maximum amount of $35,000. If you didn't, of course, have other CARES Act funding that you'd already received. So that's good knowledge for those businesses right here in the city. Let's go back to a couple of questions on Facebook. We've got a few more rolling in. This is from John on Facebook, talking about timing, Rudy. Am I correct to say we can cover costs from March 16th, 2020 to November 30th, 2020? I'm assuming talking about when they're looking out and forecasting what their expenses will be.
Yeah, so certainly the March 16th date is one that we keep it, that's kind of fixed. The November 30th, you can actually spend in advance of that. If, for instance, if you pay rent and you worked out a deal with your landlord to pay rent in advance, if that was what your business felt like you needed more than anything, you would just have to have spent it by November 30th. So you can pay for future expenses as long as the money is out the door by November 30th.
Rudy, I want to throw in another one. I feel like I'm cutting off the audience here, but I know this one we get a lot from our community. In economic development, we obviously think a lot about businesses, but also arts organizations and artists. How does that work with the program? Can an arts organization apply?
Yes, arts organizations and independent artists can apply. There's we have included, again, we followed the PPP guidelines for the types of businesses and organizations that can apply. And so as long as, I think, 501c3s can certainly apply. So a nonprofit art organization can apply. I think there are some other nonprofit statuses that are not currently eligible that, maybe in a next round. But art organizations, as well as independent artists, can certainly apply. And because I know, for instance, a lot of artists that we've heard from are saying, like a Craft Lake City was canceled, and they typically have a big year, and they were slotted. And so that's something that, being able to show that you lost revenue because an event was canceled is something that we ask for, but certainly they're eligible to apply. The one
even if you're even if you're a potential vendor at Craft Lake City, right? And they canceled the entire event.
Yeah, so we'd need documentation. But that and so it's in some cases, if there was a contract signed that you were going to be at this event, email correspondences that you were gonna be here at a certain time, and especially if you've been there in the past, you can say, this is what I made last year, and this is what I lost out on this year because the event was canceled. The one thing I will say is there was a CARES Act funding program for the humanities, and so if your art organization received that, you would need to include that in your grant worksheet.
That is interesting. I think, Roberta, I would sort of continue that conversation with you because I know so many businesses had taken advantage of those programs early on. I might ask you, do you know of many small businesses that opted not to go into and accept previous CARES Act funding from PPP or any of the other programs that have been made available?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was previously suggested that some businesses' accountants told them to return the funding if they weren't going to be able to spend it, because then, especially for the PPP, it turns into a loan. if you can't spend it on what the requirements are. And so that's definitely happened. I would imagine that some businesses didn't apply for the EIDL loan because it is a loan. Again, and do you want to be considering, as a business that's struggling during COVID and we don't know for how long this will last, do you want to be taking on a loan? And so I think that's what a lot of businesses have weighed is, do you want to be taking on debt during this time? Obviously, grant is much more ideal. And that's why we're really happy that the county is doing this grant through the CARES funding, and the state has all the grant programs as well. Even, that's something that we even considered with our loan that we put out, our emergency loan program back in March. Making it zero interest was really important because yes, this is still a loan that businesses are taking on during sort of a crisis. So it's definitely something you have to consider.
And one way that we thought about that as well is bridging to these other resources that are available. And so it's great that you can take advantage of this program, even having applied to the ELP, given that it wasn't funded with CARES Act dollars.
Rudy, I don't know, is it available knowledge how much is left in the pot? I know you said you started out with about $40 million. What's give or take left in the pot?
So far we've approved $6 million. So that puts us at roughly 36 million remaining. That said, there's still a bunch of applications that are under review and have not yet been approved. And off the top of my head, I'm unsure of kind of what that ballpark range is for kind of applied for but not yet committed funds. But we've approved 6 million. So there's technically still 34 million remaining. And we've had 10 million in requests. So we're still at around the $30 million mark that's available.
So for those businesses that have applied recently, there's still about 4 million that's in queue, in decision, and in review as well. So just hold tight and they'll be getting with you. But there is a substantial 3/4 at most still available right now. So that's great.
And I'll say the average grant award is $18,000. So again, we go down to as low as $500 and up to $35,000, and it seems like people are falling, in the $18,000 to $20,000 range, which, given the fact that many of these businesses are the really small businesses, it makes sense. But so you're not too small to apply. You can be too big, but as long as you've got under 100 employees, we'd encourage you to apply.
Great. I'd like to get to these couple of questions that we have in from our Facebook feed, if we can, before we run out of time here in about 8 minutes. The next question from Facebook, I believe, is coming from Matt, again on Facebook. If a company received PPP funds, is that subtracted from the documented losses for the SBIG grant amount?
Yes. So if you'll recall that table, and if you're looking at the grant application, you've got your actual or your expected revenues, your actual revenues, and then COVID-related expenses. That would be kind of one sum that would be kind of eligible award, but then you would subtract the PPP or the EIDL or any other CARES Act funding from that total to get you to kind of a new potential grant amount.
Next question from Omer again on Facebook. In regards to expenses covered by the grant, can digital and marketing agencies use advertising spends such as Google or Facebook ad placements and web hosting services or expenses categorized? Can those be covered as an expense for this grant?
Yeah, so as that sounds like to me a very traditional operating expense for a business. This grant is meant to help businesses continue functioning as businesses. So your business knows kind of where the funding gaps are. For some that's going to be payroll, for some that's going to be rent, for some that's going to be utilities, but for some that's going to be kind of advertising and marketing in order to build a client base or customer base. And so that is a a very typical business operating expense, and so it would be something that would be covered.
Ben, I'm going to give you a tough question here, and I think it's something that's on a lot of folks' minds as we look at the bigger picture, and talking about not just the grant here from the county, but overall resources as well. This is a question. The money's helpful, but only gets me through September. What other resources are available for the rest of 2020? And I know part of that involves sort of a crystal ball, and there are discussions, and it seems like there's traction for further and future programs. But what is the advice to those businesses that sort of have that? You can see that end of the line coming, and resources are running thin.
Well, some of the crystal ball I don't have to have, Andrew, because your team's done such a great job keeping our website up to date. So if I can plug that again, it's just slc.gov/ed/COVID-19. And on that webpage, we keep it up to date with all the resources that are available. So if we're talking about EIDL or the programs at the state, there are several programs going on right now that were just modified in the most recent legislative session. Taking a look there and seeing what fits for your business needs is always great, and continuing to check back in because say the Senate and Congress come to an agreement and next week there's a new program. Well, we've got a resource that your team's developed, Andrew, that will help keep businesses up to date and is constantly updated with that information.
And I'll just jump in too, as far, aside from financial resources that we're still hopeful are coming, is we're hearing a lot about the sort of businesses pivoting is sort of from their traditional model. And there's a lot of resources out there. One of them being, one of our partners, Local First, are putting together online academies on how to get your business online. We found that a lot of businesses that from out the gate that pivoted quickly are obviously still hit, but not hit as hard. And I know this doesn't apply to all businesses, but for ones that can transition to a stronger online model, will definitely help you get through probably the rest of the year.
And I think when we think about resources as well, it's not just financial or what best practices are, but an element of that is also there are a lot of changing guidelines out there. When for example, somebody shifts to a color code, or the state maybe updates their guidelines. A lot of the questions that we get are, where do I find the latest guidelines and know how I should be operating? And that's also on our resource page in those three buckets. One is best practices and sort of these things that you're talking about, Roberta. One is financial, and then one is really so best practices, financial, and then just guidelines and regulations and where you can get the latest information on that.
And speaking of guidelines, those are changing constantly. Go ahead, Rudy.
I was just going to say, I'll jump into the other thing to keep in mind is that as we get closer to the end of the year, as the year goes on, and depending on how much money we still have remaining, we may open up for more rounds of funding as well. So even if you have applied in the past, you keep checking in, because that may open up and you can apply again. I also just received an email from the SBDC today that they are offering free resources, to meet with a kind of a business coach to help navigate some of the challenges during this crisis. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
And if I can have one quick last plug, this is more for workforce, but it needs to come through the business. The Tip Your Server program is something that we've worked on in partnership with Ty Burrell. It's focused on the food and beverage industry and the servers in that industry, some of the hardest hit in this situation with COVID-19. That program is coming to an end. We don't have an exact date, but it's based on available funds, and we are looking to wrap that up in the near future. So that's also on our resource page, and if you're interested, I'd encourage you to check that out.
Great, thanks, Ben. And I think we're entering an interesting phase here where some of these initial programs have come online. Some have been fully subscribed to this point. Others are still available out there. So I think it's critical for businesses to keep abreast of those resources that are available. Just about 1 minute to go. I'd love to maybe just go around quickly. Roberta, Ben, Rudy, just a quick maybe 20, 30 seconds on how the city and the county. You're hoping to spread the word on these products and services. There's a marketing component here. And then also what the outreach is like to those underserved communities, diverse-owned businesses, women-owned businesses that we've seen the metrics, have not received these programs and these funds and these resources as much as others. So maybe, Roberta, we'll start with you there.
Yeah, sure. We've been working really closely with our diverse chamber partners to get the information out about what's out there. The Pacific Islander Business Alliance, Swazo Business Center, the Utah Hispanic Chamber, Utah Black Chamber, Utah Asian Chamber. All those are great partners that we're working through to get the word out to their members or constituents, because I think that is definitely a large part of all this is not only knowing what's available, but navigating that as well. So those have been incredible partners as far as taking the lead on getting all the information all the way through to the small business, one person sole proprietor owner.
Ben?
Yeah. So we are, we take this issue quite seriously, and we think about this all the time. And I think some of the ways that we'd like to ask any businesses that are attending this session to help is, if you know a business as well, please reach out, let them know about this resource that's available. I know the county's done a few other webinars, and maybe Rudy will talk about that in just a second, but we also work quite closely with our partner organizations and getting out the word through them, because we know businesses are most closely connected through them. So it's something that we definitely take seriously, and welcome any feedback on that as well.
Great, Rudy. I'll give you the last word. We're running out of time, but let us know about outreach and how we can help.
Yeah, so we've also worked through kind of some of the diverse chambers. Most heavily, we've relied on the Swazo Business Center to help spread the word. We have, we made it a priority to have diverse language speakers on our hotline staff, and so that's and we've translated kind of all the materials into some of the real big languages. And then one of the other things that we're trying to do is tell the stories of successful businesses. So far, we've done 6 of those stories, and 3 of them have been female-owned, and 3 have been minority-owned businesses. And those are promoted on our social media. And so what we're hoping to do is highlight businesses that have been successful in receiving the grant and are doing some pretty cool things. And I feel like building a narrative around these successes will hopefully help spread the word as well. But that's mostly kind of taking place through our social media.
Great. Thanks, Rudy. Thanks to Ben as well, and Roberta as well, and thank you for joining us. We've come up 2 minutes over time here, but certainly appreciate you all joining us for this webinar on the Small Business Impact Grant and other resources available for businesses. Again, we're always here to help from the Salt Lake City Department of Economic Development and our friends at the Salt Lake County Regional Development Office as well there. Our website's slc.gov/ed/COVID-19. And Rudy, it's slco.org, correct?
Yes, slco.org/COVID-19.
Great. Thank you all so much for being here, and keep the questions coming. The actual video will be posted in its entirety on our social media site. So if you have other questions, we'll be taking a look at that feed to answer them if you have any other concerns. Thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks.
Thanks.